Good morning and welcome to this public meeting of the University Board of Trustees. My name is John Verbanek and it's my honor to serve as chairperson of the board. This meeting has been duly advertised as a public meeting in accordance with the Sunshine Act and is therefore open to members of the public as observers. This meeting is also being streamed on the university's YouTube channel. The meeting is being recorded and will later be made available via the Board of Trustees website. As a quorum is present for the transaction of business, participation in the meeting is limited to members of the board and to those individuals the board has invited in advance to take part. I would like to welcome you all, and we will begin with our first order of business, which is the approval of the minutes from the June 21st, 2024 Board of Trustees public meeting. The minutes, as referenced, were circulated in advance of today's meeting and were included in our meeting materials. May I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second. Having heard it, any comments or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Thank you. The meetings are approved, or the minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, I'd like to call upon our Chancellor. Chancellor Gable, will you please share your report with the board?
Thank you, Chairperson Verbanek. Good morning, everybody. Members of the board, it's very nice to see you, but I must begin with sad news that on Sunday, June 30th, the University of Pittsburgh lost one of its icons with the passage of Robert Greer, known affectionately to our community as Bobby Greer, at the age of 91, but still too soon. As a member of the Pitt football team, Bobby made history when he became the first Black player in the history of the Sugar Bowl, desegregating the prestigious postseason game when the Panthers took on Georgia Tech in New Orleans on January 2nd, 1956, at the very outset of the American Civil Rights Movement. He represented Pitt in the Sugar Bowl in the face of opposition from the governor, but with full support of his Panther teammates and the University of Pittsburgh leaders who said, "No Greer, no game." Bobby earned his bachelor's of business administration from Pitt in 1957. He served in the Air Force for 12 years and left as a captain. He then worked as a supervisor for U.S. Steel and as an administrator at the Community College of Allegheny County until his 1998 retirement. He's a member of the Sugar Bowl Hall of Fame and Pitt Athletics Hall of Fame. He also received the Distinguished Alumnus Award from the African American Alumni Council of the Pitt Alumni Association. We extend our deepest condolences to the Greer family and Bobby's many friends and loved ones, and I know several of you are on this call today. Members of the board, as you know, it's also budget season, and important decisions are made on the university budget, but also on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania budget. The Commonwealth budget matters a great deal to the Pitt community because each year the Pennsylvania legislature appropriates around $150 million to the university. The entirety of this amount goes to one purpose. It funds the in-state tuition discount for Pennsylvania students. On average, this discount reduces a Pitt student's tuition bill by about $15,000 annually, or $60,000 over a typical four-year undergraduate degree. And approximately 16,000 undergraduate Pitt students from Pennsylvania and their families benefit from this tuition discount provided by the state appropriation. So yesterday, the Pitt General Assembly agreed to a spending plan for the Commonwealth. The legislature approved funding for Pitt and the other state-related universities at roughly the same amount as last year. Lawmakers did approve a 13% increase in our rural education outreach line item, which benefits the Pitt Bradford campus. And we're very grateful for this support and that lawmakers have once again provided the life-changing in-state tuition and partnership with Pitt that provides the discount for our Pennsylvania students. The General Assembly also passed legislation that will change the state's process for allocating funding to the state-related universities by creating a performance-based funding formula. This bill will create a 5-voting member performance-based funding council with 1 voting member appointed by the governor and the others appointed by the 4 caucus leaders of the General Assembly. Each state-related institution will have a non-voting role. The legislature tasked this forthcoming council with making recommendations for a new system to distribute funding to state-related universities using performance-based metrics from a list of metrics. They'll determine the funding available to the state-related universities under a performance-based formula, and Pitt and the other state-related universities' annual appropriations will be considered under separate legislation and continue to be allocated in a manner consistent with the current process. This formula should provide Pitt and the legislature with more transparency and predictability and enable us to strengthen our commitment to and partnership with the Commonwealth. So we're very excited about this process going forward. Finally, the legislature also approved reforms to the state's name, image, and likeness statute, which will impact positively our athletics department and our student athletes. We were very pleased that the legislature approved the language supported by Pitt and Penn State that prevents the NCAA or conferences or other athletic associations from entertaining complaints or opening investigations or taking other adverse action against an institution of higher education for directly compensating student athletes for the use of that athlete's name, image, or likeness. The legislation also protects student athletes from accepting compensation, which should help us as we navigate through this new age, this new gray area as it emerges, as we move our athletic department into this new order that we find ourselves in that puts us in a very competitive landscape and puts Pennsylvania on equal footing with other states as we address this new competitive athletic environment that we find ourselves in. So we're very grateful for the legislature's hard work and look forward to continuing to work with the Commonwealth's leaders, stressing the importance of our appropriation for Pennsylvania students and tackling the challenges that face Pennsylvania as being part of the robust Pennsylvania economy and leading with workforce development in the way that the University of Pittsburgh definitely can. So turning now to the university's budget, members of the board, I thank you for your leadership in helping to develop the university's operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2025. Your diligence and perspectives, your expectations and insights have been essential. And I especially want to thank you, Chairperson Verbanek, for your guidance, the Finance and Budget Chairs, Larry Merlot and Vice Chair Jack Tighe, for your engagement through this process. I want to thank Thurman Wingrove and his entire team, who've been unbelievable as we've looked at our new development. Definitely the most active interim leadership that we've seen in quite some time in a university environment. Developing the annual budget is a highly collaborative, time-intensive, very hands-on shared governance process that requires the efforts of many constituents across all of our campuses. Finance and Budget Chairperson Merlot will put forth a resolution recommending the approval of a $3.2 billion operating budget this morning. This is a balanced budget for the university that reflects our strengths as a great academic and research institution and a regional anchor committed to excellence and affordability. So allow me please to highlight a few key numbers for you. $1.2 billion, that is the projected research base included in this budget, with research grants from the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania being our top sources of funding. This reflects Pitt's position as a global leader in research and innovation. This amount is a key reason why our overall budget is up 6% from last year's budget. Nearly $300 million, that's the amount this budget has earmarked for financial aid to students and their families this year, an amount that has increased by 45% since 2019. More than half of all Pitt students, in-state and out-of-state, receive financial aid. These dollars are in addition to the in-state discount provided through the Commonwealth's much-appreciated appropriation. Nearly half of Pitt students graduate debt-free, and this aid is a critical element in providing an affordable education to our students. 2%, that's the tuition rate increase our in-state undergraduate and graduate students will see for the upcoming academic year, an amount well below inflation as we remain focused on affordability. For the regional campuses, tuition rates will be held flat, reflecting the economic challenges faced by smaller colleges and regional campuses across the country. Because of our focus on providing financial aid, net tuition costs have only increased by about 1% on average for in-state students during the last 5 years. This equates to an average increase of approximately $110 per term for in-state students. 3%, that's our salary pool increase included in this budget for our non-represented staff. This aligns with the negotiated salary benefits for our represented faculty members, and it reflects the university's desire to continue to attract, invest in, and retain top talent and be an employer of choice, and aligns roughly with where inflation has been reported. And $265.2 million. That's the proposed capital budget for the upcoming fiscal year. It's strategically focused on projects and initiatives that align with the Plan for Pitt 2028, which was endorsed by the board earlier this year. Overall, this budget reflects the university's commitment to Pitt students and their families, Pitt alumni, and the investment they've made in this degree, our amazing faculty, and our critically important staff, and our mission of service and teaching and learning at levels of available and accessible excellence. And with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report and say I'm more than happy and available for questions.
Thank you, Chancellor Gable, for that most informative report. Are there any questions for the Chancellor? Seeing none, we will move forward with our primary order of business today, which is to consider the university's fiscal year 2025 operating budget and capital budget. As part of the board's governance review process, we adopted a new charter for the Finance and Budget Committee, and the annual review and approval process for the university's operating and capital budgets were revised. I want to begin by commending the work of Chairperson Merlot and Vice Chairperson Teig and the entire Finance and Budget Committee as they helped us implement this governance change. At this time, I'd like to ask Chairman Merlot to share some comments. Larry?
Thank you, Chairperson Verbanek. I'll go ahead and make a few high-level comments and then ask our interim CFO, Thurman Wingrove, to provide additional details. Earlier today, the Finance and Budget Committee voted to recommend to the full board the fiscal year 2025 operating and capital budgets. Most importantly, as we heard from Chancellor Gable, we're recommending a balanced budget. Our revenues will match or exceed expenses. And while this may sound like a given, more and more prominent institutions across the country are facing 8-figure deficits. And while we are in a favorable position this fiscal year, continued vigilance by the board, the Finance and Budget Committee, and management will be a key to our long-term vitality. We must monitor the headwinds that face higher education as an industry and deploy proactive strategies to stay ahead of that curve. Many of these strategies are outlined in the Plan for Pitt, which the full board endorsed earlier this year. And key considerations will include access and affordability, the diversification of revenue streams, bringing an entrepreneurial mindset to the university's auxiliary enterprises, and reducing administrative overhead. In short, this budget positions us to fulfill these aims. And with that overview, I'll ask Thurman to provide additional details. Thurman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could move to the next slide, please. Just a brief overview of the university's proposed budget for FY 2025. Again, it's a $3.2 billion budget. That is shown in the middle of the page on the right-hand column. You'll see our total revenues of nearly $3.2 billion. It is broken up into the various budgetary units that the university employs. Our unrestricted educational and general operations is in the first column on the left, and you'll see that that is budgeted to be a break-even operation. Our auxiliary operations include housing, dining, retail, and parking, both at the Oakland campus as well as the regional campuses. That operation is budgeted to generate a surplus of a little over $19 million. Those funds are rolled over each year into reserves for the auxiliary operations to be used for future capital, renovation, maintenance needs. The restricted and research column includes all of our gifts and fundraising activity, as well as research activity for all of our non-School of Medicine areas. That category of our budget is also budgeted to break even because those dollars are not truly discretionary, but must be spent in accordance with either the donor's wishes or the sponsor's wishes. The SOMD stands for School of Medicine Division. That includes the School of Medicine, as well as the research activities of Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic and the Hillman Cancer Center. This category, the budget, includes several revenue sources, including tuition from our medical students, a portion of the Commonwealth appropriation, research grants and contracts, which comprise about 2/3 of the university's overall research portfolio, and also funds received from UPMC for support of the School of Medicine division. And then finally, plant funds includes funds received from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for various construction projects on campus. So overall, there is a slight surplus budgeted of a little over $26 million, comprised of the auxiliary operations and the School of Medicine division, but otherwise it is a balanced budget. And I would conclude my remarks there and turn it back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Thurman. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Majdi Abulban.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson Verbanek. Question for Thurman or the Chancellor. Thurman, thank you for your outstanding work, by the way. So we have a balanced budget on flat year-on-year Commonwealth appropriations. So to the extent we have visibility, how does this compare to our immediate peers?
We don't have clear benchmarking data against our peers, but in conversations I've had with some of my counterparts and my sense in looking at financial statements from other schools, I think most large research institutions similar to Pitt are still proposing balanced budgets each year. However, that's becoming more and more of a challenge, and we've read about some of the issues across the country with both large and small institutions and being able to meet their budgets. But my sense is that they're still attempting to get there, but it's much more difficult than it was in recent years.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll add to that if I could, that I suspect this year you're going to see, from what we're starting to see trickle in, and this is the season, that most of the schools in our peer group are going to be proposing a higher in-state tuition rate than we are, or those that would be proposing where we are going to be also proposing cuts.
Thank you. Next, I will recognize John Marr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I wasn't sure I had unmuted. Thank you. Our Chancellor, I believe, has set a record of sorts. I don't believe she's had quite a single year completed at Pitt, but has now been able to applaud 2 successful appropriations from the Commonwealth. I don't know that that's ever happened before. So I'm delighted, and I congratulate you on that. But with that congratulations, truly thanks to our colleagues on this board, Senator Costa, Representative Frankel, and perhaps most importantly, Rob Ritson, and to everybody who got this done last night, so that when we consider the budget today, a huge uncertainty has been relieved from our shoulders. So I certainly appreciate that timing and wanted to say thanks. I'm also happy that Pitt is going to improve its accessibility. If there are many measures for that, but if we use the Pell Grants, it seems like we're going to be reaching more and more youngsters who might not otherwise have had this opportunity. And that I think our Pennsylvania students are going to be increasing too. But I know that's not directly in the budget, but it's part of the numbers. But I do think it's important. We often focus about our students, and we should, but we're a research university. And what's amazing when I look at this budget is that research provides more resources for the university's mission than anything associated with students. It's impressive. And that research money goes directly into Pittsburgh and the regional economies. There's no doubt that the eds and beds theory from some years ago has proven resilient in Pittsburgh. Pitt is economic engine for Western PA, even though that's not really our mission. It is a consequence of what Pitt does. And I hope we all remember that. And having said that, the other thing that was interesting to me about this budget is, of course, we depend on donors, contributors. And when we add up all of our donors, we're expecting that UPMC contributions to the university will exceed that of every other donor applied to our budget for the year ahead. Oh. That's a big number. And I want to say thanks to UPMC for being so charitable to Pitt. And those are just my observations, Mr. Chair, and I thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, I'd like to recognize Gary Brown.
Thank you, Chairperson Urbanek. I have a question in search of some context. There may not be an easy answer for it, but Committee Chair Merlo touched on, as did Thurman, various prominent research institutions that are in stages of financial distress. We need not look any farther than our neighbors. Penn State trying to fill a hole that is, at last reading, 102 million. And looking south at West Virginia University trying to fill a hole that's 45 million. Now, so far, we've been able to deliver on our mission without any significant disruption, either to programs or to staffing. My question is, the one that may be tough to address, is there something about our budgeting process that sets us apart? Or have we just been better at selecting managements that are better at making tough decisions? Or maybe it's both, especially tough decisions with respect to expenses. So that's my question. And again, I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that.
Chancellor, would you like to address that, or Thurman?
Well, it would be very self-serving for me to say that it's been the quality of the leadership, but as I've inherited, I would say that there is a definite filter in the decision making, and I will repeat something that I think this entire group has heard Thurman say many times, which is the budgeting process that we utilize requires each of the budgeting units to work within their own process to address the internal effects of inflation. So in effect, the impact of inflation is born internally within each budget and requiring its own cost management or its own cost avoidance year over year. That is a natural mechanism that I think has been very productive for us. In my observation, I think I still have some objectivity about this. We also have fewer campuses, in fairness. And as a result,
Oh,
lower risk. There's an adage in risk management, my area, that usually you would want to have more space to spread your risk. This is what you would normally want. But in this particular case, in this unique sector that we're in, we are better served having less. And the campuses that we have are very strong, very well partnered in their communities, and very well led. And so that has been helpful too. And I think we're very well governed in the partnership and expectations of the board. And that has served us well too. But this is not an easy time. We will have to make it. There's no question that there will be tough decisions that we will have to make over time. We are very excited about the CFO who will be joining us imminently, who has tremendous amount of experience. He will obviously be supported and partnered with a tremendous team, including the person who you've seen presenting, who obviously is excellent and knows every penny of this budget. So I'm despite the headwinds and challenges, very optimistic for all of the reasons that you are too. But I think I'll just stick, after saying all those words, I'll stick with the option that you gave, Gary, of the strength of the team. How about that?
That'll work.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Gary, for your comments. And I should note, John Marr appropriately pointed out several members of our board who were directly involved in the Commonwealth budget. But as often is the case when having a list of people to thank, we sometimes miss one. And it reminded me that a new board member for us, Representative Arian Abney, who's on with us, a member of the Pennsylvania House, also lent his shoulder and his support and his vote to the University of Pittsburgh. So Representative Abney, thank you very much. Next, I'd like to recognize Robbie Luxbacher.
Thank you, Chairperson Verbanek. And before I ask my question, I really want to thank both Larry and Thurman yet again for not only all the work that went into pulling this budget together, and that was a huge team effort, but also all the reviews that you all have had. I think this is the clearest rendition of the budget that we have ever seen, and breaking it into its components so we could really look at it, I think was very important. So I want to thank you. My question is this: cultivating student success, that's one of the pillars of the plan for Pitt. And the important measure in this area is access and affordability. That matters a lot to students and their families. It happens to be something I'm personally passionate about as also a first-generation student at Pitt, where affordability was a really major issue for myself. So the Chancellor shared great financial aid statistics in her remarks. The increase in Pell Grant students, very, very important. But what other ways does this budget advance our efforts to improve accessibility and affordability? That also may be a tough question like Gary's was.
No, I think it's a great question, and I think it's the question. So I'll take a little moment to reiterate that we are at an all-time high for investment in student financial aid, $300 million annually. And there are commitments in the strategic plan. So it's part of our strategic considerations that go more than year over. The budget is a year over year reflection, and we're always looking for additional resources. Within the budget this year is our commitment in the Finish Line grants. That's the newest piece that you see reflected. That's available to students starting this fall. We announced that on the 100th day of my administration. This is a unique need-based grant to help undergraduate students in their last couple of semesters cross the finish line as they pursue their degree, because this is targeted aid at what we know statistically is one of the highest risk moments for students who may be experiencing financial challenges. that often occur as they're very close to finishing. And they've made most of their time investment and certainly expended most of their financial resources and pulled themselves out of the job market for the bulk of the time necessary to pursue the degree, and have the distraction of either feeling they've run out of money or in fact have run out of money and don't finish. And that is the worst possible outcome, is to be close and then not finish. And so we've created the finish line grants to ensure that that's not something that happens to a Pitt student. And so with the right support programs, we know that we'll be able to get the aid to the students who need it the most in time, as a moment in time grant. And that's in the budget for this year and ongoing. And then as part of our work with our fundraising arm, we're always looking for ways to continue to increase the financial support, expand the support for the Pell student programs, and partner. So you'll see more and more of that, and also reflected in the plan for Pitt, more programs in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Robbie, for the question. The chair recognizes Jack Tighe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. A couple of things. I just wanted to recognize a little bit the Commonwealth and Harrisburg budget that they passed, which I know the overall budget's up about 6%, and they increased the budget for the Paschy schools and community college, again, about 6%, which is very good news, I think, for higher education in Pennsylvania. Having served on the Paschy board for 7 years, I have a very kind of intimate knowledge of that system and the importance of it, along with community colleges. And I think that's particularly important that that's all supported. I would also point out, I was pleased with this performance-based funding program that they're implementing. And although that won't impact us in fiscal year 25, at least I don't expect it, I think that's really a step forward from the Commonwealth. And then I'd also note there are programs they put in place in support of Pennsylvania students, a number of different programs, and I brought this up earlier, and programs for in-demand professions, all of which I think we need to keep a close eye to see how we can be supportive of Harrisburg's initiatives in those areas. Having said all that, I would point out what the Chancellor's pointed out, that our increase, I think she said, over the last 5 years in tuition averaged about 1%, which in this environment is just truly remarkable. It really is. And I don't know what that is compared to CPI or even Commonwealth support, but I know it's a lot less than what's going on around the world in every effort in the state and in universities, et cetera. So I applaud the university for their efforts. And I don't know, Mr. Chairperson, if you have any insight, do you know where we stand even with kind of our increases compared to CPI over that period, et cetera?
I do not, Jack, have that specific number, but perhaps the Chancellor or Thurman do.
I can tell you that, over the last 6 years, our tuition rate increases have averaged just a little bit more than 2% on the Oakland campus for in-state students. And it's actually been less than 1% at the regional campuses. So at least for the last 6 years, those tuition rate increases have been significantly less than CPI.
Thank you for the question and comments, Jack, and thank you, Thurman. I'd like to recognize Dr. Vaughn Claggett.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Verbanek. I just wanted to start by thanking and congratulating our Chancellor on what was a phenomenal year and the number of accomplishments that she's had in such a very short time. So congratulations to her. I did want to go back to research. We are an academic research powerhouse. We are a major engine for the region through our research. So my statement and question would be, the Chancellor shared that our research base is projected to be 1.2 billion this year, with many of the sources being federal agencies. As resources become tight, universities are in an ultra-competitive environment. How are we positioning Pitt for success, both with federal agencies and more broadly to sustain our critical research mission?
Yeah, I love that question because I think that it just to sort of set a landscape. Obviously, one of the distinctions that Pitt has is the breadth and success of the research mission. And given that we're in the public portion of the meeting, I think it's really important to note that the research mission, as we've discussed, has a tremendous impact on the solutions and discovery and expansion of the knowledge base that the university is able to achieve, and allows us to be a part of solving real problems and developing real treatments and cures. It also creates real learning opportunities for students. These are not either ors. These are not things that in any way do anything other than expand what our students are able to do from the very first day an undergraduate student walks through the door as a first year student, all the way up to if they go into whatever level of graduate education that they want to pursue. Everything about the research mission is a benefit to being in the classroom, in a lab, living in the neighborhood, being part of one of our community engagement project outcomes, being a patient in the hospital. It's just in every way positive. And so the fact that this is successful and growing is just so outstanding. And if I sound like I'm a cheerleader for it, it's because I am. So with that said, what are we doing to make sure that this continues? Well, as you might imagine, with this kind of positive outcome, we put a lot of energy into making sure that the momentum continues. So some keys to this success, and then I'll turn it over to the people who really make it happen. It is changing what, if you say we literally try to create new knowledge, which is what a university does, this is a thing that evolves. You don't solve something and then stop when you're in this kind of space. So how is it evolving is into large interdisciplinary collaborative teams. So gone are the days of one scientist sitting in a room by themselves answering questions. So these problems are complex and interdisciplinary. And so we have to be interdisciplinary. And so we are changing as research teams, and we're building out larger and bigger teams. We're also building out suites of programs that are building into big proposal boot camps in order to support those teams. And we're diversifying in how we expand who we partner with. Most of our research funding comes from the federal government, but we want to think about the different ways that we can take all of that research, commercialize, make it useful and applied. Intellectual property, taking all the patents. We're a top patent producer, but making sure we take all of that to market. And we're a leader in health sciences research, top 10 recipient of National Institute of Health funding. But we want to make sure that you can't just rest and stay there. We want to make sure we stay there. Requires active, intentional work. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over first to Rob Rutenbar, our Vice Chancellor for Research, and then to Dr. Nantha Shekhar to talk about the specific steps that each of them are taking to make sure the enterprise continues to grow. I'll start with Rob.
Sure. Thanks, Chancellor. Thanks for the question, Vaughn. You know, at a very high level, I mean, one of the great things about being in an exceptionally strong school, and you know, just to double down on some of the numbers, you know, top 15 or 16 in overall research performance as measured by the National Science Foundation, top 5-ish reliably, 3 a couple of years ago in performance in NIH health sciences funding. one of the things that's true about Pitt is that we compete exceptionally well at the top of the food chain of the peer research R1 institutions. And just sort of a reminder, most of the funding that we get in the research space is competitively awarded. We submit about 4,500 proposals annually, right, across the kind of the federal ecosystem, the foundation ecosystem, the corporate partner research sponsorship ecosystem. And although we are not particularly happy about, kind of ongoing conversations in DC about cuts to basic science and basic funding, at the end of the day, we are exceptionally good at competing for those fundings. And again, the reminder, those things are awarded competitively. At the end of the day, they give it to the best proposals, and we have a very strong record of being at the top of the food chain at the end of the day. Right. And as the chancellor said, the other thing that's been happening over the last decade or so is a bit of a pivot away from exclusive, even at the federal level, kind of, focus on individual investigator activity and a lot of focus on team science, a lot of collaborative things, a lot of multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary things. Ever since I got to Pitt, one of the things that we've been doing is just building out support infrastructure and support ecosystems to let people come together and do teams better, more effectively, more expeditiously, giving people more support. And where we can actually measure that there's more team science going on at Pitt, there's more team proposals going on at Pitt, there's more teaming activity going on at Pitt. People who go through some of the training workshops that my team runs are better at going after and succeeding at big science kind of funding. So all of those things sort of synergistically make it possible for us to stay at the top of the game, even in a somewhat challenging kind of federal funding ecosystem.
Anantha, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you all. I think Rob covered those statements well. So let me recognize Dawn Hector. Dawn, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So being a member of the Budget Committee, I got to see firsthand really the incredible work that Thurman and his team has done. And I also want to, thank the Chancellor and obviously Larry and Jack for their leadership on this. But my question's for Thurman. And incredible that we have this balanced budget and it's done in such a way that we've able to really keep tuition increases at an incredible minimum over the last several years. And I've seen the process up front. And the Chancellor has commented today on opportunities to increase the monies coming in as we think of our budget through philanthropy, donations, et cetera. But the other side of a budget is the cost and the expense. And I know that, Thurman, you've put together a pretty strong, cost focused program. And my questions really is, what's your confidence level as you go forward that we continue to also keep a focus on cost management?
Thank you, Dawn. Yes, great question. My confidence level now is high, and I'll tell you why. For many years, the university's budget has had a built-in parameter that we don't grant inflationary increases on non-compensation expenses. And so what that's done is that's kind of been built into the DNA of the academic units and the support units. So they know they're not going to see those automatic cost of living increases in their non-compensation expenses. And what that's done is that's forced them to really think creatively and to be very diligent about how they manage those expenses. So they've taken steps to, better utilize their attrition rates, to take advantage of IT opportunities for efficiencies, to share services across departments and units. So the fact that that's kind of built in or ingrained in the thought process of all of the deans and all of the support units gives me a higher level of comfort that we'll be able to manage those costs going forward.
Thank you for that question, Dawn, and thank you for the confidence, Thurman. I'd next like to recognize Eva Bloom.
Thank
Eva?
you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I first of all want to congratulate and thank our Chancellor for a tremendous year. We certainly had all the confidence that it would be great to have you here, and boy, have you proven us correct. So thank you so much for being here and for all the work that you have been doing. I also want to acknowledge and just kind of maybe pile on a little with thanking you all for increasing the accessibility for our students. It's been a passion of this university for many, many years, and it's so wonderful that we can make our great university accessible to more and more people. But I also want to say on a different note, going around Oakland and seeing all those cranes at Hillman and on the new wellness center, it's exciting that we are constantly improving the campus. And I'm just asking, are we on track for all of that? To finish those projects.
Chancellor, would you like to offer a few comments?
Yes, my understanding is that all of our projects are on track. And there was, as we know, some delays at the top of the hill as a result of some circumstances, but otherwise we are on track and with full expectation of everything proceeding as we are expecting. As has, I think the last time we had a PNF report was in May. Am I remembering the timing correctly? And everything was on schedule.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. And Eva, thank you for those, for your opening comments. They so well reflected what I know to be the opinion and feelings of our fellow board members. And Joan, I'll add my voice to that chorus and say thank you. So with that, I do not see any further questions or comments. So for all of you who did offer those robust comments and questions, thank you. I'd like now to turn it back to Larry and ask if you would like to move approval of the operating and capital budgets, Larry.
Well, John, I sure would. Okay.
I'm sure you would.
And just let me thank the committee again, and thank you, John, for your leadership, and certainly the Chancellor's leadership as well. So thank you for the privilege to move that the Board of Trustees approve the fiscal year 2025 operating budget and capital budget as included in our materials and discussed here in this meeting this morning.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Having been seconded, at this time, we'll take a roll call vote alphabetically by last name. Phil, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Agbaidi?
Yes.
Trustee Berrien?
Lisa, yes.
Trustee Bloom?
Yes.
Trustee Bridget Jones?
Yes.
Trustee Brownlee?
Yes.
Trustee Claggett?
Yes.
Trustee Costa?
Yes.
Chancellor Gable?
Yes.
Trustee Gelati?
Yes.
Trustee Gismondi?
Yes.
Trustee Golden?
Yes.
Trustee Hickton?
Yes.
Trustee Lieberman?
Yes.
Trustee Luxbacher?
Yes.
Trustee Maher?
Yes.
Trustee McDowell?
Yes.
Trustee Merlot?
Yes.
Trustee Njai?
Yes.
Trustee Ritson?
Yes.
Trustee Sidori?
Yes.
Trustee Teig?
Yes.
Trustee Verichetti?
Yes.
Trustee Verbanek?
Yes.
Trustee Wade?
Yes.
Trustee Kevin Walker?
Yes.
Trustee Ward?
Yes.
The motion passes with 26 ayes.
Phil, and thank you, trustees, and thank you, Larry, for your leadership. Is there any additional business to be brought before the board today? Recognizing none, hearing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.